The silk wedding gown felt like a prison as Keira Bennett sprinted through the back corridors of the Grand Cascade Hotel, her heart hammering so violently she thought it might burst through her ribcage. Behind her, the strains of the string quartet still played, oblivious to the fact that the bride had just abandoned 200 guests, a devastated groom, and a future she'd never wanted in the first place. Her lungs burned as she crashed through the service exit, the June afternoon heat hitting her like a wall. The white dress tangled around her legs, threatening to send her sprawling across the concrete, but she gathered the layers of tulle and lace in trembling fists and kept running. She had no plan, no destination, just the overwhelming need to escape, before someone realized she was gone and dragged her back to that altar, where Marcus Pemberton waited with his practiced smile and cold eyes. The private airfield stretched out before her, a section of the hotel's sprawling grounds reserved for wealthy guests who arrived by helicopter or jet. Keira had discovered it during the rehearsal dinner, memorizing its location like a prisoner studying escape routes. Now, as her designer heels clicked frantically against the tarmac, she spotted her salvation. A sleek black jet with its stairs extended, the cabin door open as if inviting her inside. She didn't hesitate. Whoever owned this aircraft would just have to understand. She'd explain, apologize, throw herself on their mercy. Anything was better than going back. The interior of the jet was pure luxury. Cream leather seats, polished wood paneling, soft lighting that gave everything a golden glow. Keira stumbled inside, her breath coming in ragged gasps, and nearly sobbed with relief when she spotted a door at the rear of the cabin. Storage, perhaps, or a bathroom, somewhere to hide. She wrenched it open and found herself in a small but elegant sleeping compartment. A bed with crimson silk sheets dominated the space, flanked by dark wood furnishings that looked antique despite the modern surroundings. Without thinking, Keira dove beneath the bed, the wedding dress creating a ridiculous amount of fabric that she struggled to compress into the tight space. The engines hummed to life moments later. Keira's eyes widened in the darkness beneath the bed. No. She'd meant to hide temporarily, just until the search party gave up and moved on. She hadn't intended to actually be on board when the jet departed. Panic clawed at her throat as she felt the aircraft begin to move, taxiing across the runway. She should reveal herself, call out, explain the situation before they were airborne. But the thought of being discovered, returned to the hotel, forced down that aisle to marry a man her father had chosen for her business connections, rather than love, it paralyzed her. Keira pressed her hand over her mouth to muffle her breathing and stayed hidden as the jet accelerated, lifted and carried her away into the sky. The flight lasted hours. Keira's body ached from maintaining her cramped position beneath the bed. Her elaborate updo had come completely undone, and her mouth was dry as sand. She'd heard footsteps enter the sleeping compartment twice, but whoever it was had simply moved around the space and left again without checking beneath the bed. Each time, her heart had nearly stopped. Now finally she felt the descent beginning. Her stomach dropped as the jet lowered through the clouds and she braced herself for landing. When the wheels touched down with barely a shudder, Keira had to admit that whoever piloted this aircraft was exceptionally skilled. The engines powered down. Footsteps moved through the cabin, then silence. Keira waited, counting to 100, then 200. When no further sounds reached her, she began the awkward process of extracting herself from beneath the bed. The wedding dress had not survived the ordeal well. It was wrinkled, torn in places, and smudged with dust. She didn't care. She'd burn the thing if she could. She emerged from the sleeping compartment on unsteady legs, gripping the doorframe for support. The main cabin was empty, bathed in the bluish light of evening. Through the windows she could see they'd landed at what appeared to be a private airfield, though not the one she'd fled from. Unfamiliar mountains rose in the distance, their peaks touching a sky that was rapidly darkening. Where was she? The cabin door remained open, stairs leading down to the tarmac. Keira moved toward it cautiously, half expecting someone to appear and demand an explanation. But the airfield seemed deserted except for the jet and a single black car parked nearby, sleek and expensive looking. She was halfway down the stairs when she heard his voice. Running away from something, I presume? Keira froze, her hand clamping down on the railing. The voice was deep, elegant, with an accent she couldn't quite place. Old European, perhaps, though no specific country came to mind. It held amusement, but also something darker. Something that made her skin prickle with awareness. She turned slowly. He stood at the bottom of the stairs, having apparently materialized from nowhere. And he was there was no other word for it. Stunning. Tall and lean with an aristocratic bearing that made Keira think of old paintings in museums. His hair was pure white. Not the white of age, but something more ethereal, falling to his shoulders in a way that should have looked feminine, but instead made him appear even more commanding. His skin was pale as marble, flawless, and his eyes were crimson, not brown, not an unusual shade of amber that caught the light strangely. Crimson, red as blood, red as rubies, red as warning. Keira's breath caught. She'd heard stories, of course, everyone had. Whispers of the old bloodlines, the ancient families who ruled from the shadows, the creatures who'd inspired every vampire legend in human history. But they were just stories, myths, things that existed in movies and books, not in the real world where private jets and society weddings happened. Yet here he stood, regarding her with those impossible eyes, and every instinct she possessed screamed that the stories were true. Her voice came out as a croak. She cleared her throat and tried again. I didn't mean to stow away. I was hiding and then the jet took off and I didn't know what to do. So you hid beneath my bed for 6 hours. He tilted his head, studying her with unnerving intensity. Resourceful if uncomfortable, and you've ruined a very expensive dress in the process. It's my dress, Keira said, defensive despite her terror. I can ruin it if I want. The corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been amusement. He moved up 2 stairs with fluid grace, closing the distance between them, and Keira fought the urge to retreat. Something told her that running would trigger a predator's instinct in him, and she was very much prey at the moment. A wedding dress, he observed, reaching out to finger a torn section of lace. His hand was inches from her waist, though he didn't touch her skin, which suggests you were running from more than just an unpleasant social engagement. That's none of your business. The words came out sharper than she'd intended, born of hours of fear and cramping muscles and the surreal nightmare her perfect, controlled life had become. Those crimson eyes fixed on hers, and Keira felt as though he could see straight through to her bones. You made it my business when you boarded my aircraft without permission. I could have you arrested. Then, do it. Exhaustion and recklessness made her bold. Have me arrested? Send me back, it doesn't matter. I'm not marrying Marcus Pemberton, and I don't care what anyone says or does to make me. Silence stretched between them. The evening air had grown cold, and Keira shivered in her ruined dress. He noticed, of course those eyes noticed everything. Come, he said finally, turning and descending the stairs. You're hardly dressed for the weather, and I suspect you haven't eaten or drunk anything in quite some time. I'm not going anywhere with you. Fear made her stubborn. I don't even know who you are. He paused at the bottom of the stairs and looked back up at her. In the dying light, his white hair seemed to glow, and his pale skin was luminous, beautiful and terrible all at once. My name is Raven Draconescu, he said, and there was dark amusement in his voice as he watched her face pale further. And as you've clearly surmised, I am not human. I am, in fact, the king of our kind in this territory. So you have 2 choices. Keira Bennett, yes, I know your name. The runaway bride of the Bennett-Pemberton merger has been all over the news for the past 3 hours. You can come with me willingly, or I can compel you to do so. Either way, you're not staying on this airfield. The casual mention of compulsion should have terrified her. It did terrify her, but Keira was too exhausted and overwhelmed to do anything but descend the stairs on shaking legs. When she reached the bottom, Raven offered his arm like a gentleman from a bygone era. She stared at it for a long moment before accepting, her hand settling into the crook of his elbow. His skin was cool through the fabric of his black shirt. Not cold exactly, but lacking the warmth of human contact. It should have repulsed her. Instead, she found it oddly comforting, like pressing her hand against marble on a hot day. He led her to the waiting car, opened the back door and gestured for her to enter. The interior was as luxurious as the jet-black leather-tinted windows, a privacy screen between the back and front seats. Keira sank into the seat with a grateful sigh, her abused feet rejoicing at the chance to rest. Raven slid in beside her, close enough that she could smell him. Something like winter nights and old books and a spice she couldn't identify. The car began to move, though Keira hadn't heard him give any instructions. Where are we going? She asked quietly. Somewhere safe. He was watching her again, that unnerving intensity that made her feel exposed. You're exhausted, hungry, and still in shock. I have a residence nearby where you can rest and decide what you'd like to do next. And then what? You'll just let me go? That depends on several factors. He reached into a compartment beside the seat and produced a bottle of water, offering it to her. Drink, you're dehydrated. She wanted to refuse out of principle, but her throat felt like sandpaper. Keira accepted the bottle, broke the seal to ensure it hadn't been tampered with, and drank deeply. The water was ice cold and tasted like salvation. Why are you helping me? She asked when she'd drained half the bottle. You said yourself I'm all over the news. Harboring me is only going to cause you problems. Raven's expression was unreadable. I have my reasons. That's not an answer. No, he agreed. It isn't. The car wound through increasingly remote roads, climbing into the mountains she'd seen from the jet. Night had fallen completely now, and through the windows Keira could see stars scattered across the sky like diamonds. She'd never seen stars like this in the city, too much light pollution. Here they were breathtaking. We're in the Carpathians, Raven said, noting her interest. Romania specifically, my ancestral homeland. Romania. She was in Romania. Keira's mind reeled. 6 hours by private jet, yes, that made sense. She'd fled from New England and ended up halfway across the world in vampire territory. Is that why you were in the States? She asked. Business? Something like that. His tone suggested the topic was closed. The car turned onto a narrow private road, then passed through massive iron gates that opened silently at their approach. Keira caught a glimpse of family crests worked into the metal dragons and ravens, intertwined in intricate patterns. Then the gates closed behind them, and they were driving through manicured grounds toward a structure that made her breath catch. It wasn't a house. It was a castle. Not some crumbling medieval ruin, but a perfectly maintained Gothic masterpiece of towers and battlements, lit from below so that it seemed to glow against the night sky. Gargoyles perched on the corners of the towers, their stone faces frozen in eternal vigilance. Arched windows gleamed with warm light, and the main entrance was flanked by columns carved with more dragons. This is your residence? Keira breathed. One of them. Raven's voice held a note of satisfaction. This is Castle Draconescu. It's been my family's seat for 900 years. 900 years. The number was incomprehensible. This building, these stones, had stood through centuries of human history. Empires had risen and fallen in the time this castle had endured. The car stopped at the main entrance, and Raven exited first, then offered his hand to help Keira out. She emerged in a rustle of ruined silk, suddenly and painfully aware of how she must look disheveled, dirty, wearing a destroyed wedding dress to a vampire king's castle. I must look ridiculous, she muttered. You look, Raven said thoughtfully, his eyes sweeping over her, like someone who fought for her freedom and won. The words struck something deep in Keira's chest, and to her horror, tears pricked at her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. She would not cry. She'd made it this far without breaking down, and she wouldn't give in now. Raven noticed, of course. He noticed everything. But rather than comment, he simply guided her up the stone steps and through the massive wooden doors that opened at their approach. The interior of Castle Draconescu was like stepping into a different era. Vaulted ceilings soared overhead, supported by carved pillars. Tapestries hung on the walls, genuine medieval tapestries, Keira realized with awe, not reproductions. Chandeliers dripped crystal light across marble floors polished to a mirror shine. And everywhere that sense of age, of history layered upon history. Welcome to my home, Raven said softly. A woman appeared from a side corridor, moving with the same fluid grace as Raven. She was also pale-skinned and white-haired, though her hair was arranged in an elegant updo that emphasized her sharp cheekbones. Her eyes were the same crimson as Raven's, and she wore a severe black dress that looked like haute couture. My lord, she said, inclining her head. Her accent was similar to Raven's but more pronounced. We were not expecting guests. This is Keira Bennett, Raven introduced. She'll be staying with us temporarily. Keira, this is Serafina, my castle steward and advisor. Serafina's crimson eyes assessed Keira with shrewd intelligence. The runaway bride, I see. Shall I prepare the guest suite in the East Tower, please? And have Maria draw a bath and lay out appropriate clothing. Also have a meal sent up, human food, something light but nourishing. Of course, my lord. Serafina turned to Keira, and her severe expression softened slightly. If you'll follow me, Miss Bennett? Keira glanced at Raven, suddenly reluctant to leave him despite everything. He was dangerous, possibly the most dangerous being she'd ever encountered, but he'd also shown her more consideration in the past hour than Marcus had in their entire engagement. Go, Raven said gently. Rest. We'll speak more tomorrow. The guest suite in the East Tower was larger than Keira's entire apartment back home. The main room featured antique furniture that was probably worth more than her car, a fireplace tall enough to stand in, and windows with views of the moonlit mountains. Through an arched doorway, she could see a bedroom with an enormous four-poster bed, and beyond that, a bathroom where steam already rose from a claw foot tub. A young woman in a simple black dress was adjusting the temperature of the bathwater. She looked up as Keira entered and smiled warmly. Unlike Serafina and Raven, her eyes were normal, deep brown, kind, and very human. Miss Bennett, I'm Maria, she said in accented English. I'm here to help you with anything you need. The bath is ready, and I've laid out nightclothes and a robe. Lord Draconescu said you might need assistance with your dress? Keira looked down at the wedding gown. The buttons running down the back would be impossible to reach on her own. Yes, please. Maria's fingers were deft as she worked the tiny buttons free, keeping up a stream of gentle chatter about the castle, the weather, the gardens. Keira let the words wash over her, too tired to do more than murmur occasional responses. When the dress finally fell away, she stepped out of the puddle of silk with profound relief. "I'll have this cleaned and mended if you like," Maria offered. "Or if you prefer, I can simply dispose of it." "Burn it," Keira said firmly. Maria's eyes sparkled with understanding. "As you wish, miss." Left alone in the bathroom, Keira sank into the hot water and groaned as her abused muscles began to unknot. Someone had added oils to the bath that smelled of lavender and something else, something soothing. She closed her eyes and tried to process everything that had happened. This morning, she'd woken up in her childhood bedroom, preparing for a wedding she didn't want. Now she was in a vampire's castle in Romania, soaking in a tub that probably cost more than her college tuition. The vampire in question was royalty, impossibly beautiful, and for reasons she couldn't fathom, had decided to help her rather than simply sending her back to face the consequences of her runaway act. None of it made sense. Keira had spent her entire life in a world of logic and order, following the rules laid out by her family and society. Bennett women married well, managed charities, and produced the next generation of Bennett children. They did not flee their own weddings. They did not stow away on private jets. They certainly did not end up as guests of vampire kings, yet here she was. Keira stayed in the bath until the water began to cool, then forced herself out and into the towels Maria had left warming by a heated rail. The nightgown was silk, soft as a whisper against her clean skin, and the robe was plush velvet in a deep burgundy color. When she emerged from the bathroom, she found that Maria had laid out a meal on a small table by the fireplace. Soup, fresh bread, cheese, fruit, and wine that probably cost more than she wanted to contemplate. She ate mechanically, her body demanding fuel even though her mind was too scattered to properly taste anything. When she'd finished, exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. The enormous bed called to her, and Keira crawled between sheets that felt like clouds. She expected to lie awake, her mind churning with worries and fears. Instead, she fell asleep almost instantly, plummeting into darkness so deep that not even dreams could reach her. When Keira woke, sunlight was streaming through the window's proper daylight, strong and golden. She sat up in confusion, noting that heavy curtains had been drawn back from the glass. Vampires couldn't tolerate sunlight, everyone knew that. So why would Raven's castle be designed with such large windows? A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." Keira called. Maria entered carrying a tray with coffee, pastries, and fresh fruit. "Good morning, Miss Bennett. I hope you slept well." "Like the dead," Keira said, then winced at her word choice. Maria just smiled and set the tray on a table by the windows. "Lord Draconescu asked if you would join him for breakfast in the solar once you're awake," Maria said. "I've laid out clothes in the dressing room. If they don't fit or aren't to your taste, please let me know, and I'll find alternatives." The dressing room turned out to be a walk-in closet filled with women's clothing in various styles and sizes. Keira found jeans that fit perfectly, a soft gray sweater, and even undergarments and socks in her size. It was slightly unsettling how well prepared they were for unexpected female guests. She dressed, ran her fingers through her tangled hair in a futile attempt to tame it, and followed Maria's directions to the solar. The castle was even more impressive in daylight, with the sun illuminating details she'd missed the night before. Intricate moldings, paintings that were probably museum-worthy, suits of armor standing sentry in alcoves. The solar turned out to be a glass-enclosed room with a spectacular view of the mountains. Plants filled every corner, creating a lush garden atmosphere, and a table had been set with breakfast for two. Raven stood by the windows, dressed casually in dark pants and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He turned as she entered, and Keira was struck anew by how otherworldly he was. "Good morning," he said. "I trust you slept well?" "Better than I have in months," Keira admitted. Then, gesturing to the sunlit room, "I thought vampires couldn't tolerate daylight?" "Most can't," Raven agreed, moving to pull out a chair for her. "But those of us from the ancient bloodlines, particularly those of sufficient age and power, can withstand brief exposure. It's uncomfortable but not fatal. I don't make a habit of sunbathing, but I'm not imprisoned by the night either." Keira sat, and he took the seat across from her. The table was laden with breakfast foods, most of which looked too delicious to be good for her. There was also a crystal glass filled with something dark red at Raven's place setting. He noticed her looking at it. "Blood, yes. I won't insult your intelligence by pretending otherwise, but it's ethically sourced volunteers from my household who are well compensated and medically supervised. We're not the monsters your species makes us out to be in movies. Your species makes you out to be monsters because you drink blood to survive." Keira pointed out, reaching for coffee. And your species slaughters millions of animals annually for food, Raven countered mildly. Perspective is an interesting thing, don't you think? He had a point. Keira sipped her coffee, which was the best she'd ever tasted, and tried not to watch as he drank from his own glass. There was something oddly intimate about it, seeing him sustain himself, though she couldn't explain why. I suppose you want to know what I plan to do, she said after a moment. Whether I'm going to call my family, turn myself in, face the music. I'm more interested in what you want to do, Raven said. Not what's expected of you. The question caught her off guard. When was the last time someone had asked her what she wanted? Not her father, who'd arranged her engagement to Marcus to merge their business empires. Not Marcus himself, who'd simply assumed she'd be grateful for the match. Not even her mother, who'd been too busy planning the wedding of the season to ask if Keira actually wanted to be the bride. I don't know, she admitted quietly. I just knew I couldn't marry him. He's not cruel exactly, but he's cold. He sees me as an asset, a pretty addition to his portfolio, and my father sees me the same way, a piece to be moved around the board to strengthen the Bennett empire. She laughed bitterly. I've been preparing for this my whole life. The right schools, the right internships, the right social connections. Also, I could be an acceptable bride for someone like Marcus Pemberton. And now, Raven prompted, now I'm a scandal, the runaway bride. My father will be furious, Marcus will be humiliated, and I'll probably be cut off from the family fortune. Keira met his eyes across the table. And I find I don't care as much as I should. Does that make me a terrible person? It makes you human. He set down his glass and leaned back in his chair, studying her. You're 23 years old, Keira. Far too young to lock yourself into a loveless marriage for the sake of business interests. How did you know my age? I told you, you've been all over the news. The articles included quite a bit of background information. His expression was wry. You're quite famous at the moment. The Bennett heiress who vanished from her own wedding without a trace. There are theories ranging from cold feet to kidnapping to murder. Keira groaned and buried her face in her hands. My father must be losing his mind, quite possibly. Which brings us to the practical matter at hand. Raven's tone became businesslike. You can't hide here forever, and eventually you'll need to deal with the fallout from your decision. However, I can offer you a temporary refuge while you decide how you want to handle things. Why? The question burst out of her. Why would you do that? You don't know me. Helping me only creates complications for you. Raven was quiet for a long moment, his crimson eyes distant. Let's just say I have a certain sympathy for those trapped by circumstances beyond their control, he said finally. And leave it at that. There was a story there, Keira sensed. Pain buried beneath centuries of composure. But she didn't push. She was hardly in a position to demand explanations when he was offering her sanctuary. Thank you, she said softly. I know that's inadequate, but I mean it. Thank you. They finished breakfast in companionable silence, and afterward Raven offered to show her the castle grounds. Keira accepted eagerly, desperate to move after yesterday's cramped confinement. He led her through hallways lined with portraits his ancestors, she realized, noting the recurring features. Pale skin, white hair, crimson eyes, the Draconescu bloodline painted across centuries. Do you remember them? She asked, pausing before a portrait dated 1547. Your ancestors? Some of them were my ancestors, Raven corrected. Others were contemporaries. That one, he gestured to the 1547 portrait, was my younger brother Lucian. He died in 1603, killed by vampire hunters during the purges. The casual mention of such loss, of having lived through centuries of history, made Keira's head spin. How old are you? I was born in 1127, Raven said. So by human reckoning, I'm 899 years old. My millennium birthday is next year. There's talk of a large celebration, though I find the whole concept rather ridiculous. 899 years. Keira tried to wrap her mind around it and failed. He'd been alive during the Crusades, the Black Death, the Renaissance, the World Wars. He'd seen empires rise and fall, technologies transform the world beyond recognition. That must be incredibly lonely, she said without thinking. Raven glanced at her, something flickering in his expression. Yes, he said simply, it is. They walked through the gardens, which were extensive and beautifully maintained. Roses bloomed in profusion despite it being late in the season, and stone paths wound between fountains and statuary. It was peaceful here, removed from the modern world, and Keira felt tension she hadn't realized she was carrying begin to ease from her shoulders. Tell me about Marcus Pemberton, Raven said as they paused beside a fountain depicting dragons. What made you flee rather than simply ending the engagement through normal channels? Keira considered her words carefully. Marcus is powerful. Not like you, obviously, but powerful in the human world. His family owns media companies, tech firms, real estate across 3 continents. When he wants something, he gets it, and he wanted me because my family's pharmaceutical empire would complement his holdings perfectly. That doesn't explain why you didn't simply refuse the engagement, because my father made it clear that refusing wasn't an option. The bitterness crept back into her voice. He's been grooming me for this match since I was 18. Every decision in my life has been made to prepare me for it, and Marcus, he can be charming when he wants to be. But I've seen how he treats people who displease him, his employees, his business rivals, even his own family. There's something missing in him, some capacity for empathy or genuine emotion, and the thought of spending the rest of my life with him, of letting him touch me, she broke off, shuddering. Raven's hand came to rest gently on her shoulder, and she was surprised by the comfort she found in the touch. You were right to run, he said quietly. A life without choice is no life at all. They stayed in the gardens for hours, talking about everything and nothing. Keira found herself opening up to Raven in ways she never had with anyone else. Maybe it was because he was so removed from her world. Or maybe it was simply that he truly listened without judgment or agenda. He told her stories of the castle's history, of the vampire courts and their complex politics, of a world that existed alongside humanity but hidden from mortal eyes. We've learned to be careful, he explained. There was a time when we were more open about our nature, but that led to persecution, hunting, slaughter. So we adapted, we built our own societies, our own systems of government. We interact with the human world when necessary but maintain our distance. But you're still vulnerable, Keira said. Sunlight, wooden stakes, all the things from the legends. Some of them, yes. Sunlight weakens most of our kind severely, and the truly ancient vampires are completely nocturnal. Wooden stakes through the heart will kill us, as will beheading or fire. We're not invincible, just very difficult to kill. He gave her a sidelong look. Does it frighten you? Knowing what I am. It should, Keira admitted. But no, not really. You've been nothing but kind to me. That matters more than what you are. Something shifted in Raven's expression, a warmth entering his eyes that hadn't been there before. You're a remarkable woman. Keira Bennett. Heat crept up her neck at the compliment, and she quickly changed the subject, asking about the roses. But as they continued through the gardens, she was acutely aware of him beside her, the cool grace of his movements, the old-world courtesy in his gestures, the way his attention made her feel seen in a way she never had before. This was dangerous, she realized. Not because he was a vampire, but because she could feel herself becoming drawn to him in ways that had nothing to do with gratitude or circumstance. Evening fell, and with it came other members of Raven's household. Serafina joined them for dinner, along with 2 other vampires, Nikolai, who served as head of security, and Isabella, who managed the Draconescu business interests across Europe. All of them were pale and elegant, with that same otherworldly beauty that made them both magnetic and slightly unsettling. They treated Keira with careful courtesy, though she caught them exchanging meaningful looks with each other and with Raven. She was clearly an unusual situation, and they weren't sure what to make of her presence. Over dinner, a spectacular meal that would have put any 5-star restaurant to shame, the conversation turned to politics and business. Keira found herself fascinated by the glimpse into vampire society. They spoke of territorial disputes, trade agreements, ancient feuds between bloodlines. It was like a parallel world running alongside the human one, equally complex and politically charged. The Corvinus clan is pushing for expanded territory again, Nikolai said, his expression grim. They're claiming that the western borders should be renegotiated. The western borders have been fixed for 2 centuries, Raven replied calmly. Vladic Corvinus can push all he wants. The answer remains no. He's been making alliances, Isabella warned. Small houses that feel overlooked by the larger bloodlines. He's gathering support for a challenge. Raven's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Let him challenge. I've held this territory for 400 years. And I'll continue to hold it against anyone foolish enough to test me. The absolute certainty in his voice made Keira shiver. This was the Vampire King, she realized, not just the courteous man who'd shown her his gardens. Raven Draconescu was dangerous in ways she couldn't begin to comprehend, powerful enough to have maintained control over a vast territory for centuries. After dinner, Raven invited her to his study, a room lined floor to ceiling with books that smelled of leather and old paper. A fire crackled in the hearth, and through the windows she could see the moon rising over the mountains. I need to discuss something with you, he said, gesturing for her to sit in one of the leather chairs flanking the fireplace. About your situation. Keira's stomach tightened. Here it came, the end of her temporary sanctuary. You're sending me back? No. Raven settled into the chair across from hers, his face painted in shadows and firelight. But I've been thinking about your options. You can't simply return to your old life, your family, and Marcus Pemberton will close ranks around you, pressure you into the marriage, and you'll be right back where you started. But you also can't hide here forever. Eventually, you'll need to build a new life. I know. She stared into the fire, watching the flames dance. I have some money in accounts my father doesn't control, but not much. Enough for a few months of living expenses if I'm careful. I'll need to find work, a place to stay, probably change my name. Or, Raven interrupted gently, you could stay here. Keira's head snapped up. What, stay here at Castle Draconescu? Not forever necessarily, but for as long as you need to plan your next steps. You'd be safe from your family and Marcus, and it would give you time to think without constantly looking over your shoulder. I can't do that, Keira protested. I'd be imposing on your hospitality indefinitely, and what would I even do here? As it happens, I could use an assistant. Raven leaned forward, his crimson eyes intense. Someone to help manage correspondence with the human world, handle dealings with mortal businesses, serve as a liaison between my household and human contacts. It would be paid work, with room and board included. You'd have your independence but also security. It was an impossible offer, too generous to be real. Why would you do this for me? Because I've spent 9 centuries watching people trapped by circumstance, by duty, by expectations that slowly crushed the life out of them, Raven said quietly. And because you remind me of someone I once knew. Someone who deserved better than what fate gave her. The pain in his voice was raw, ancient. Keira wanted to ask, to know the story behind that sorrow, but she held back. Instead, she considered his offer seriously. Staying here would solve her immediate problems. She'd be protected, employed, and free from her father's machinations. But it would also mean entering Raven's world more completely, becoming part of vampire society in a way that could never be undone. More than that, it meant spending more time with Raven himself. And she was already far too aware of him, far too drawn to his presence. Staying could be dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with his nature as a vampire. But what choice did she really have? Return to a life she'd literally run from? Try to make it on her own with minimal resources and her family hunting her? I accept, Keira said. Thank you. I'll work hard, I promise. I won't make you regret this. Something like relief crossed Raven's features. I don't think I will. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. Keira threw herself into her new role as Raven's assistant, discovering that she had a knack for navigating the complex intersections between vampire and human business interests. She handled correspondence, arranged meetings, negotiated contracts with human vendors who had no idea they were actually working for vampire lords. Raven was an exacting but fair employer. He expected excellence but was patient with her learning curve, and he had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard at odd moments. They worked together in his study most evenings, since he was still primarily nocturnal despite his ability to tolerate daylight. Keira adjusted her schedule to match his, sleeping late and working into the night. She also learned more about vampire society and culture. Serafina took it upon herself to educate Keira in the complex protocols and traditions that governed vampire interactions. There were rules about territory, about feeding, about challenges and succession. There were ancient laws that predated human civilization and Byzantine political structures that made mortal government look simple by comparison. You're taking to this remarkably well, Serafina observed one evening, as they reviewed the guest list for an upcoming reception. Most humans find our world difficult to accept. Most humans don't have the vampire king himself vouching for them, Keira replied, checking another name off the list. That probably helps. Serafina's lips curved in what might have been approval. Lord Draconescu has been different since you arrived. Lighter somehow. He smiles more. The observation made Keira's heart skip a beat, though she tried not to show it. She was acutely aware that her feelings for Raven were developing beyond gratitude or professional respect. She caught herself watching him when he wasn't looking, noticing the elegant way he moved, the thoughtful expression he wore when concentrating, the rare, genuine smiles that transformed his face. It was foolish, she told herself. He was a 900-year-old vampire king, and she was a human woman who'd stumbled into his life by accident. Whatever kindness he showed her was born of pity or perhaps boredom, nothing more. But then there were moments that made her wonder. The way his hand would linger on her shoulder when he was explaining something. The intensity in his eyes when he looked at her. The night she'd fallen asleep at her desk and woken to find herself carried to her bed, tucked in carefully, with Raven sitting in a chair nearby reading as if he'd been watching over her. "Did you bring me here?" she'd asked sleepily. "You were exhausted," he'd replied simply. I didn't want you waking with a cramp in your neck. She should have found it unsettling, but instead she'd felt cherished. The reception Serafina had been planning turned out to be a major event, a gathering of vampire lords from across Europe to discuss territorial agreements and trade relations. Keira helped with preparations, ensuring that the human staff was prepared and that all the elaborate protocols would be observed. You don't have to attend, Raven said the evening of the reception. It may be uncomfortable for you being surrounded by so many of our kind. I want to be there, Keira insisted. I'm your assistant. That means assisting, not hiding in my room when things get challenging. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Wear something formal. I'll have Maria help you choose an appropriate gown. The gown Maria selected was a deep sapphire blue, elegant and sophisticated without being overly revealing. It hugged Keira's curves perfectly, and when she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman looking back. This wasn't the society bride who'd fled her wedding. This was someone stronger, surer of herself. The reception was held in the castle's grand ballroom, a space that could have been lifted from a fairy tale. Chandeliers blazed with light, reflecting off polished floors and gilded fixtures. Vampires in formal evening wear mingled, their pale skin and white hair creating an almost surreal tableau. Humans from Raven's household circulated with trays of blood in crystal glasses, and Keira noticed that the vampires treated them with respect rather than contempt. She stayed close to Raven as he greeted his guests, hyper-aware of the curious and sometimes hostile looks directed her way. A human at a vampire gathering was unusual. A human standing at the Vampire King's right hand was unprecedented. Lord Draconescu, a voice purred, and Keira turned to see a striking vampire woman approaching. She had the characteristic pale skin and white hair, but her eyes were a different shade, more amber than crimson. How delightful to see you, and who is this? Lady Morgana, Raven replied, his tone cordial but cool. May I present Keira Bennett, my personal assistant? Keira, this is Lady Morgana of House Ravencroft. Morgana's eyes swept over Keira with barely disguised disdain. How modern of you, Raven. Employing humans in such elevated positions, Miss Bennett has proven herself invaluable, Raven said, and there was steel beneath the politeness. I'm quite pleased with her work. The message was clear. Keira was under his protection, and any insult to her was an insult to him. Morgana's expression soured, but she inclined her head in acknowledgement and moved on. Similar interactions played out throughout the evening. Most of the vampire lords were carefully neutral, though a few were openly friendly. One in particular, a vampire named Stefan who governed a territory in Hungary, engaged Keira in genuine conversation about the challenges of maintaining human business connections in the modern era. It's refreshing to meet a human who understands our world, he said with a warm smile. Usually mortals either try to pretend we don't exist or become so frightened they can barely function. I find it easier to deal with honest reality than comfortable lies. Keira replied. Stefan laughed. You're good for Raven. He's been too isolated for too long. Before Keira could ask what he meant, a commotion near the ballroom entrance drew everyone's attention. A vampire had entered, tall and imposing, with white hair that fell past his shoulders and eyes like blood. He wore elaborate formal wear that seemed almost theatrical, and the crowd parted before him instinctively. Vladek Corvinus, Raven said quietly beside her, and Keira heard the warning in his voice. This should be interesting. Vladek crossed the ballroom with deliberate slowness, his gaze fixed on Raven. When he reached them, he executed a bow that was technically correct but somehow managed to convey mockery. Lord Draconescu, he said, thank you for inviting me to your charming gathering. I don't recall extending you an invitation, Raven replied calmly. An oversight, surely. Vladek's eyes slid to Keira, and she fought not to recoil from the predatory interest in them. And who is this delectable creature? Don't tell me the great Raven Draconescu has finally taken a human pet. Watch your tongue, Corvinus. Raven's voice was soft, but the threat in it was unmistakable. Miss Bennett is my employee and honored guest. You will treat her with respect. Of course, of course. Vladek's smile widened, showing teeth that were slightly too sharp. No offense intended, I simply find it curious that you would surround yourself with such fragility. Humans break so easily. The temperature in the room dropped perceptibly. Other vampires had stopped their conversations to watch, sensing the confrontation brewing. If you have something to say to me, Corvinus, say it directly, Raven said. Stop dancing around the matter like a coward. Vladek's smile vanished. Very well. I'm here to formally challenge your territorial claims in the West. The Corvinus bloodline has rights to those lands that predate your kingship, and I'm calling for a tribunal to review the matter. Silence fell across the ballroom. Keira might not understand all the intricacies of vampire politics, but she understood that this was a serious challenge to Raven's authority. Your family relinquished those territorial rights in 1624, Raven said, his voice carrying across the room, in exchange for amnesty after your grandfather's failed coup. The matter was settled before the High Council and witnessed by 7 bloodlines. If you wish to challenge that decision, you're welcome to present your case to the council. But I suspect you'll find they have long memories and little patience for reopened wounds. Vladek's expression darkened. Things change, Draconescu. Old alliances shift. You've held power for a long time, but nothing lasts forever, not even you. Is that a threat? A prediction? Vladek's eyes cut to Keira again. Be careful with your pet, my lord. It would be a shame if something were to happen to her. Raven moved then, faster than Keira could track. One moment he was beside her, the next he had Vladek by the throat, lifted off his feet despite being equally tall. The casual display of strength was terrifying and awe-inspiring in equal measure. Threaten what is mine again, Raven said, his voice like frozen death, and I will show you exactly why I've held power for 4 centuries. Your bloodline will be nothing but a memory, Corvinus. Do you understand? Vladek managed a jerky nod, his face beginning to purple. Raven released him, letting him stagger back and turn to address the room at large. Let this be clear to everyone present. Keira Bennett is under my personal protection. Any action against her will be considered an action against me, and will be met with the full force of my authority. Are there any questions? Silence. Then, one by one, the assembled vampires inclined their heads in acknowledgement. Even Vladek, rubbing his throat, managed a stiff bow before retreating from the ballroom. The reception continued, but the mood had shifted. Keira found herself surrounded by a bubble of space, other guests giving her a wide berth. She wasn't sure if they were respecting Raven's claim or simply afraid to be seen too close to her. I'm sorry, Raven said quietly when they had a moment of privacy. I didn't intend for you to be caught in vampire politics. You defended me, Keira replied. Thank you for that. But Raven, did I just make you a lot of enemies? You didn't make anyone anything. Vladek has been looking for an excuse to challenge me for years. He simply chose to use your presence as a catalyst. His jaw tightened. But his threat against you was real. We'll need to increase security measures. The thought that she was now a target because of her association with Raven should have terrified her. Instead, she felt anger on his behalf. Vladek was using her to get to Raven, treating her as a pawn in some ancient vampire power struggle. I won't be used as a weapon against you, she said firmly. Tell me what I need to do to keep myself safe, and I'll do it. Raven looked at her with something like wonder. You're not afraid. I'm terrified, Keira corrected. But I'm also angry, and I'm tired of being treated like a thing rather than a person. Vladek doesn't get to use me any more than Marcus did. A slow smile spread across Raven's face, warm and genuine. Remarkable, he murmured. Then louder, very well, we'll make sure you're protected. And in the meantime, we'll prepare for whatever move Corvinus makes next. The rest of the reception passed without incident, though Keira was exhausted by the time the last guests departed. Raven walked her back to her suite, his presence a solid comfort beside her. Get some rest, he said, at her door. We'll discuss security arrangements tomorrow. Keira nodded, then on impulse, reached out and touched his hand. Thank you, for everything. Not just tonight, but all of it. Raven turned his hand to clasp hers, his cool fingers gentle around her warm ones. You're welcome, Keira. Sleep well. She did sleep, but her dreams were troubled, full of crimson eyes and ancient threats, of running through castle corridors with danger at her heels. When she woke, it was to find Maria standing by her bed looking worried. Miss Bennett, Lord Draconescu needs to see you immediately, she said. There's been an incident. Keira dressed quickly and hurried to Raven's study, fear churning in her stomach. She found him standing by the windows, his expression grim. Serafina and Nikolai were also present, along with several other vampires she recognized from the household. What happened? Keira asked. Your family has traced you to Romania, Raven said without preamble. They've hired a private security firm to locate you, and apparently that firm has connections to vampire hunters. There's a team en route to this region. Keira's blood ran cold. Vampire hunters? Those are real? Unfortunately, yes. Most are humans who've learned enough about our kind to be dangerous. This particular group is well-funded and experienced. Nikolai stepped forward, his expression serious. They're not here for you specifically, Miss Bennett. They're using the search for you as cover to scout Lord Draconescu's territory. So Vladek is behind this, Keira said, understanding that he hired them. Most likely, Raven agreed. It's a clever move. If the hunters find this castle, they'll attack regardless of your presence. And if anything happens to you in the crossfire, he can claim it had nothing to do with him. Then I have to leave. The words hurt to say, but Keira forced them out. I won't put you and your household at risk because of me. You're not leaving, Raven said flatly. But you're not leaving, he repeated, and there was something fierce in his eyes. I told you that you're under my protection, Keira. That doesn't change because things become difficult. We'll handle the hunters and send them away empty-handed. How? She demanded. If they're looking for me specifically, they won't give up until they find me or confirm I'm not here. Then we'll give them what they're looking for, Serafina said. A reason to believe you've never been here at all. Over the next hour they formulated a plan. The castle staff would maintain their normal routines, with no sign that Keira was in residence. Her belongings would be moved to a secure location within the castle's hidden lower levels ancient rooms that predated even the current structure. Keira herself would remain out of sight until the hunters completed their search and moved on. How long could that take? Keira asked. Days, possibly a week, Nikolai said. They'll need to search the surrounding area, question locals. We'll direct them toward false leads. Make them believe you headed east toward Ukraine. It was a solid plan, but Keira hated the thought of hiding again. She'd spent too much of her life doing what others demanded, conforming to expectations. Now here she was, forced into concealment again because of her father's machinations and Marcus's wounded pride. I'm sorry, she said to Raven. This is all my fault. This is your family's fault, he corrected gently. And Vladek's, not yours. You've done nothing wrong except refuse to be used. The hidden chambers beneath the castle were extraordinary, a warren of rooms carved from the mountain itself, with vaulted ceilings and walls that seemed to pulse with ancient power. Raven explained that this had been the original vampire stronghold, built over 1,000 years ago when his ancestors first claimed this territory. We built the castle above it during the Renaissance, he said, showing her the room that had been prepared for her use. But these chambers remain the heart of our power. No vampire hunter would ever find them, even if they searched for years. The room was surprisingly comfortable despite being underground. Rich tapestries lined the walls, and someone had brought down a bed, furniture, and even some of her books. There was no natural light, but candles and oil lamps created a warm glow. I'll stay with you, Raven said. You shouldn't be alone down here. You don't have to do that. I'm sure you have important things to handle above. Nothing more important than this. His voice was quiet but certain. Besides, these chambers hold memories. It's been decades since I spent any time down here. Perhaps it's time I reconnected with my family's history. So they waited together in the hidden depths of Castle Draconescu, while above them, vampire hunters searched for any sign of Keira Bennett's presence. Raven brought books from his study, and they spent hours reading by lamplight, discussing philosophy and history and the strange turns both their lives had taken. Tell me about the person I remind you of, Keira said one evening. The one you mentioned before. Raven was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, her name was Alara. She was human, born in this region in the early 1400s. I met her when she was brought to the castle as a servant. You loved her. It wasn't a question. I did. She was extraordinary, bright and kind, and utterly fearless. When she discovered what I was, she wasn't afraid. She asked questions, wanted to understand. He smiled, but it was sad. We had 5 years together. 5 years of happiness I hadn't thought possible for someone like me. And then she fell ill, plague, we think, though diagnosis was uncertain in those days. I watched her die over the course of weeks, and there was nothing I could do. You could have turned her, Keira said softly. Made her vampire. She didn't want that. She'd seen what immortality cost, the loneliness of watching generations pass. She chose to live her human span and leave me with memories rather than condemn herself to eternity. His crimson eyes met Keira's. I've never let anyone that close since. It hurt too much to lose her. Keira's heart ached for him, for the pain he'd carried across centuries. I'm sorry. That must have been unbearable. It was. But it also taught me the value of the time we're given, whether it's 5 years or 5 centuries. Love is worth the risk of loss. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. You remind me that there's still beauty in the world, Keira. Still courage and strength. Still reasons to hope. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken feelings. Keira wanted to close the distance, to press her lips to his and damn the consequences. But before she could move, Nikolai's voice echoed down the stone corridors. My lord, the hunters have reached the castle. They emerged into the main levels to find organized chaos. The household staff moved efficiently through their assigned tasks, maintaining perfect normalcy despite the presence of armed intruders above. Nikolai had positioned vampires at strategic points throughout the castle, ready to defend if necessary but under strict orders to remain out of sight. Raven led Keira to a hidden observation post where they could watch the castle's security monitors. The screens showed a team of 6 humans in tactical gear, led by a hard-faced woman who introduced herself to the castle's human steward as Diana Kershaw, private investigator. "We're looking for Keira Bennett," Diana said, showing a photo. "We have reason to believe she may have passed through this region." The steward, an elderly man named Joseph, who'd served the Draconescu family for 40 years, studied the photo with appropriate concern. "I'm sorry, but I haven't seen this young woman. Are you with the police?" "Private security hired by her family. They're very worried about her." "Of course. You're welcome to look around if you wish, though I should warn you this is a working estate. The owner values his privacy." "The owner being Lord Draconescu?" Diana's tone was carefully neutral. "He's home?" "Lord Draconescu travels frequently for business. I believe he's currently in Vienna." Joseph was an excellent liar. "But I'm sure he wouldn't object to your search given the circumstances." They watched as the hunters spread through the castle, searching rooms with professional efficiency. They were thorough, checking closets and under beds, photographing various rooms. But they found nothing. All evidence of Keira's presence had been carefully removed. "They're good," Nicolai muttered. "Ex-military probably, and Diana Kershaw is known to us. She's worked with vampire hunters before." "She knows what to look for," Serafina added. "Signs of our kind. She'll be checking for evidence of Lord Draconescu's nature." "Then it's fortunate we've had centuries of practice hiding in plain sight," Raven said calmly. The search took hours. At one point, Diana stood in Raven's study, her sharp eyes scanning the books, the furniture, the heavy curtains drawn across the windows. Keira held her breath, terrified that somehow the woman would sense her presence in the castle. But finally the hunters regrouped in the main hall. "Nothing," one of them reported. "No sign she was ever here." "What about the owner?" Diana asked. "Any evidence he's unusual?" "Just," another hunter replied. "Lot of old money indicators, but nothing supernatural. Though the staff is oddly loyal, nobody would say a bad word about him." "That's not uncommon with old families in this region," Diana said. "They inspire that kind of devotion." She didn't sound convinced, but without evidence, there was nothing she could do. "All right. We move on to the next location. Thank you for your cooperation, Joseph." They watched the hunters depart, their vehicles disappearing down the mountain road. Only when they were completely out of sight did the household relax. "Well done, everyone," Raven said, addressing the assembled staff. "You've protected our home and our guest admirably. Take the rest of the evening off, you've earned it." Keira emerged from the observation post on shaking legs. "They're really gone?" "For now," Raven confirmed, "though I suspect Diana Kershaw will be keeping this region on her watch list. We'll need to remain cautious." "I can't stay here forever," Keira said. "Eventually, I'll have to deal with my family." "I know, but not tonight." Raven offered his arm. "Tonight we celebrate our victory. Will you join me for dinner?" They ate in his private dining room, an intimate space overlooking the mountains. Maria had prepared Keira's favorite dishes, and Raven kept her glass filled with excellent wine. The conversation flowed easily, and for a few hours Keira could almost forget the complications of their situation. "What will you do?" Raven asked as they lingered over dessert. "Long term, I mean. You can't hide from your family indefinitely." "I know. I'll need to contact them eventually, make it clear I'm not coming back." Keira pushed her fork through a delicate pastry. "My father will be furious. He'll probably cut me off entirely. And Marcus, I don't know what he'll do, but he's not the type to accept rejection gracefully." "You could stay here," Raven said. "Continue working for me. Build a new life away from their influence. Is that what you want?" The question came out before Keira could stop it. "For me to stay?" Raven set down his wine glass, his crimson eyes intense. "Yes, I want you to stay." The simple honesty of it took her breath away. "Why? And don't say it's because I'm a good assistant." "Because you make me feel alive again," he said quietly. "For the first time in centuries, I look forward to each evening. I want to hear your thoughts, your laughter, your stories. When I'm with you, the weight of immortality feels lighter." He leaned forward. "I know I have no right to ask this of you. You're human, you're young, you have your whole life ahead of you. Staying here, staying with me, it would be a strange existence, living in the vampire world. But I'm asking anyway because I'm a selfish creature, and I can't bear the thought of you leaving." Keira's heart hammered against her ribs. "You're not the only one who's been feeling things," she whispered. "I know it's complicated, and probably impossible. But Raven, I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them. Terrifying and liberating, Raven went utterly still, his eyes wide. "You can't," he said. "Keira, I'm a vampire. I'm 900 years old. You deserve someone who can give you a normal life, children growing old together." "I don't want normal," Keira interrupted. "I've spent my entire life being what other people wanted me to be. The perfect daughter, the perfect society bride. For once I want to choose for myself, and I choose you." Raven stood abruptly, moving to the windows. His hands gripped the sill, knuckles white with tension. "You don't understand what you'd be giving up. Then explain it to me." Keira rose and crossed to him, placing her hand on his arm. "Help me understand." He turned to face her, and the naked emotion in his expression made her chest ache. "I can give you years, possibly decades if we're lucky. But eventually you'll age and I won't. You'll watch me stay young while you grow old. And at the end I'll lose you just as I lost Alara. I don't know if I can survive that again." "Or," Keira said softly, "we could have something beautiful for however long we're given. Isn't that better than never having tried at all? You're asking me to be brave enough to love again. I'm asking us both to be brave." She reached up, cupping his cool cheek in her warm hand. "I'm terrified too, Raven. This is insane by any reasonable measure, but when I'm with you I feel more like myself than I ever have. You see me, truly see me, not as an asset or a prize, but as a person. That's worth fighting for." Raven closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. "If we do this, there's no going back. Your family will never accept it. Human society will see you as mad or worse, and the vampire world, they'll never fully accept you as my partner. I've already left my old life behind," Keira reminded him, "and I don't care what anyone else thinks. Do you want this? Want me? More than I should?" He opened his eyes and they blazed with intensity. "But Keira, you need to be sure. Take more time, think about." She kissed him. It was her first kiss with a vampire, and it was different from anything she'd experienced before. His lips were cool but soft, and he responded with a gentleness that made her heart sing. His hands came up to frame her face with infinite care, as if she were made of spun glass, and he deepened the kiss slowly, reverently. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Raven rested his forehead against hers. "I'm going to fall in love with you," he whispered. "I'm probably already halfway there." "Good," Keira replied, "because I'm definitely falling for you." They stood there together, wrapped in each other's arms, while outside the windows the night deepened and stars emerged over the Carpathian Mountains. It was the beginning of something new, something neither of them had planned but both desperately wanted. The next few weeks were a period of careful navigation as they explored this new dimension of their relationship. Raven was surprisingly tentative, as if afraid he might break her or overstep. Keira had to be the bold one, initiating touches and kisses, gradually breaking down the walls he'd built over centuries of loneliness. The household noticed, of course. Serafina gave Keira a look that was equal parts concern and approval. "I've served Lord Draconescu for 300 years, she said one evening. "I've never seen him like this. Whatever you're doing, he's happier than I've known him to be." "I'm just being myself," Keira replied. "That's exactly what he needs." Serafina's expression turned serious. "But you should know loving someone like him won't be easy. There will be challenges from the vampire world, dangers you can't imagine. Are you prepared for that?" "Honestly, I don't know, but I'm willing to try." The challenges came sooner than expected. Word spread through vampire society that Raven Draconescu had taken a human lover, and reactions ranged from curiosity to outright hostility. Some saw it as weakness, proof that the vampire king was losing his edge. Others viewed Keira as a threat, a human who might gain too much influence over one of the most powerful vampires in Europe. Vladic Corvinus sent a formal letter that barely concealed his glee. "How touching that the great Raven has finally found companionship," he wrote. "One hopes the attachment doesn't prove fatal for the young lady." "He's threatening you again," Keira said, reading over Raven's shoulder. "He's bluffing." But Raven's jaw was tight. "Still, we'll need to be careful. Vladic will use any opening he can find." The situation came to a head during a meeting of the territorial lords, a gathering that Raven had to attend. He'd wanted to leave Keira behind, but she'd insisted on accompanying him. "I won't hide," she'd said. "If I'm going to be part of your world, I need to be present." The meeting was held in an ancient hall in Prague, a Gothic structure that had hosted vampire councils for centuries. Keira felt the weight of history pressing down on her as they entered, Raven's hand warm and reassuring on the small of her back. The assembled lords watched their entrance with varying expressions. Some were openly curious, others disdainful. Vladic Corvinus stood near the front, his smile predatory. Lord Draconescu, the council's mediator, greeted them, and his companion, how unexpected. "Keira Bennett is my partner and advisor," Raven said clearly. "She has every right to be present at these proceedings. By what precedent?" Vladic challenged. "We've never allowed humans at council meetings. By the precedent that I'm setting right now," Raven replied calmly. "Unless someone wishes to formally challenge my authority in this matter." The room went silent. Challenging a territorial lord, especially one as powerful as Raven, was not undertaken lightly. After a moment, the mediator nodded. "Very well. Miss Bennett may stay. Shall we proceed with the agenda?" The meeting covered various territorial disputes, trade disagreements, and political maneuvering. Keira stayed quiet, observing the dynamics between the various vampire lords. It was like watching a chess game where the pieces had been playing for centuries, each move weighted with history and consequence. Then Vladik made his move. "Before we conclude," he said, standing, "I have a matter to raise concerning Lord Draconescu himself." Raven went very still beside her. "Speak. It's been brought to my attention that you've become compromised by your relationship with a human. This raises serious questions about your fitness to lead your territory. I'm calling for a formal review of your kingship." The room erupted in murmurs. A review was a serious matter, essentially a vote of no confidence that could lead to a challenge for leadership. "On what grounds?" the mediator asked. "On the grounds that his judgment is clouded by human emotion," Vladik said smoothly. "He's making decisions based on personal attachment rather than the good of vampire kind. And let's be honest, his human pet is a security risk. She knows our secrets, our vulnerabilities. What happens when she tires of her vampire lover and goes running back to human society?" "I would never," Keira started, but Raven's hand on her arm stopped her. "You dare question my judgment?" Raven's voice was soft, deadly. "I've held my territory successfully for 4 centuries, maintained peace and prosperity, and navigated complex human-vampire relations with skill. My personal life is none of your concern, Corvinus." "It becomes our concern when it affects all of vampire kind," Vladik countered. "How many other lords will follow your example? How long before we're all compromised by human attachments?" "Perhaps if more of us remembered what it was to feel human emotion," Raven replied coldly, "we'd be less likely to treat humans as cattle or prey. My relationship with Keira hasn't weakened me, it's reminded me what we're fighting to protect. Beauty, love, connection. Or have you become so lost in immortality that you've forgotten those things matter?" Several of the assembled lords nodded thoughtfully at this. Keira realized that Raven had support here, vampires who agreed with his position even if they hadn't spoken up. "Pretty words," Vladik said, "but they don't address the security concern. How do we know she won't betray us?" "Because I choose not to," Keira said, finding her voice. "I understand that my presence here is unusual, even controversial, but I'm not a threat to vampire society. I'm just someone who fell in love with an extraordinary person, and I would never do anything to harm him or those he cares about." "How touching," Vladik sneered. "And when he watches you age and die, when you leave him broken by grief, how is that good for the stability of his territory?" "That's his risk to take," another lord spoke up, Stefan, from the reception. "We've all lost people we cared about over the centuries. It's part of existence. Lord Draconescu is entitled to find what happiness he can, just as any of us are." Other voices joined in, some supporting Raven, others backing Vladik. The debate grew heated, and Keira realized with growing dread that this could actually tear vampire society apart. All because of her. "Enough," Raven said, and the authority in his voice silenced the room. "I won't debate my personal life before this council. If Vladik wants to challenge my leadership, he can do so formally. Otherwise, this matter is closed." Vladik's eyes glittered with malice. "Very well. I formally challenge your right to rule your territory. We'll settle this the old way." The room went deathly silent. Keira felt her stomach drop. "What does that mean?" she whispered to Raven. "It means single combat," he murmured back. "To the death." Her blood turned to ice. "No, Raven, you can't. I have no choice. He's invoked ancient law." Raven stood, facing Vladik across the room. "When and where?" "The traditional grounds 3 nights from now. Unless you'd like to withdraw your claim to the territory and surrender." "I'll see you in 3 nights, Corvinus. Try not to embarrass yourself." The meeting adjourned in chaos, vampires clustering in groups to discuss this stunning development. Raven guided Keira out of the hall swiftly, his expression grim. "This is my fault," Keira said once they were in the car heading back to the castle. "He's using me to get to you. He's using any excuse he can find. If it wasn't you, it would be something else." Raven's jaw was tight. "Vladik has wanted my territory for decades. Now he thinks he's found an opening. Can you beat him?" "I'm older and stronger. But Vladik is cunning, and he's been preparing for this." Raven took her hand, his cool fingers lacing with hers. "I won't let him hurt you, Keira. Whatever happens, you'll be protected." "I don't care about me," the words burst out of her. "I care about you. I can't lose you, not now. Not when we've just found each other." Raven pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "You won't. I promise, love. I've survived 9 centuries. I'm not about to fall to Vladik Corvinus now." But as they drove through the night, Keira couldn't shake the fear clawing at her heart. The 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Raven spent hours training with Nikolai and other members of his household, practicing combat forms that were centuries old. Keira watched from the sidelines, terrified by the lethal grace with which he moved. This was the vampire king in his element, all predator and power. She tried to help where she could, researching Vladek's fighting history, looking for weaknesses. Serafina helped, pulling ancient records that detailed past challenges. Vladek is a strong fighter but relies too much on brute force, Serafina observed. He's reckless when he gets angry. If Lord Draconescu can keep his composure and exploit that tendency, he'll win. And if he can't? Keira asked, though she dreaded the answer. Then we'll have a new territorial lord, Serafina said grimly, and you'll need to leave immediately. Vladek won't let you live, you're too much of a symbol of his victory. The night of the challenge arrived too quickly. The combat would take place at ancient grounds in the mountains, a stone circle that had hosted vampire challenges for over 1,000 years. Raven dressed in simple black, eschewing armor or weapons. This would be fought with natural vampire abilities, strength, speed, and cunning. I love you, Keira said as they prepared to leave. Come back to me. Raven cupped her face in his hands and kissed her deeply. I will. I have too much to live for now. The stone circle was lit by torches when they arrived, casting dancing shadows across the ancient rocks. Vampires from across Europe had gathered to witness the challenge, forming a ring around the combat area. Keira stood with Serafina and Nikolai, her heart in her throat. Vladek was already there, pacing like a caged animal. He'd stripped to the waist, displaying a physique that was pure muscle and threat. When he saw Raven, he grinned savagely. Ready to die, old man. Ready to teach you respect, child, Raven replied calmly. The mediator from the Prague Council stepped forward. This challenge is witnessed under ancient law. The combat will continue until one party yields or is destroyed. There are no other rules. Begin. Vladek attacked instantly, moving with terrifying speed. But Raven was faster, dodging the assault and countering with a strike that sent Vladek staggering. They clashed again and again, moving so quickly that Keira could barely track the action. It was brutal, elegant, and utterly terrifying. Blood spilled, both of them were wounded within minutes. Vladek fought with raw aggression, all power and fury. But Raven fought with the skill of centuries, each movement precise and economical. He was bleeding from a gash across his chest, but his expression remained calm, focused. Is that all you have? Vladek taunted, circling. Perhaps your human lover has softened you. Perhaps, Raven agreed. Or perhaps she's given me something to fight for beyond pride and territory. He moved then, a blur of motion that caught Vladek off guard. In seconds, he had the younger vampire pinned, hand around his throat, poised to finish it. Yield, Raven commanded. Vladek's face was purple, his eyes bulging. For a moment, Keira thought he'd refuse, that Raven would be forced to kill him. Then, barely audible, I yield. Raven released him immediately, stepping back. Vladek collapsed to the ground, coughing and gasping. The assembled vampires erupted in reaction, some cheering, others murmuring in disappointment. The challenge is decided, the mediator announced. Lord Draconescu maintains his territory and titles. The matter is closed. Raven swayed slightly as the adrenaline faded, and Keira rushed to his side, supporting him. You're hurt. I'll heal. His smile was tired but genuine. It's over, love, we're safe. They returned to Castle Draconescu as the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Raven was moving slowly, his wounds healing but still painful. Keira helped him to his chambers where Maria had prepared medical supplies. Let me, Keira said, carefully cleaning the gash across his chest. Raven watched her with soft eyes. I fought for us tonight, for the right to choose my own path, my own love, and I'd do it again without hesitation. I know. She finished bandaging the wound and looked up at him. But I don't want you having to fight for that right constantly. Maybe I should. Don't, Raven interrupted, catching her hand. Don't say you should leave for my sake. I'm not letting you go, Keira. Not now, not ever if I can help it. But your position, the other lords, will adjust or they won't. I've given centuries to duty and obligation. Now I'm choosing happiness. He pulled her into his lap, mindful of his injuries. Stay with me, build a life with me. However long we're given, let's make it count. Tears spilled down Keira's cheeks. Yes. Of course, yes. They stayed like that as the sun rose fully, two beings from different worlds who'd found something precious in each other. It wouldn't always be easy. There would be challenges from both vampire and human society, complications they couldn't yet anticipate. But they would face them together. Time passed, measured in seasons and years. Keira settled fully into life at Castle Draconescu, becoming not just Raven's partner but a respected figure in vampire society. Her unique position as a human intimately connected to the vampire world gave her insights that proved invaluable in mediating disputes and facilitating communication between species. She eventually contacted her family, making it clear that she wouldn't be returning to her old life. Her father raged, threatened, and finally disowned her. Marcus Pemberton married someone else within the year, a union based on the same cold calculations that had driven his pursuit of Keira. She felt nothing but relief. The vampire lords gradually accepted her presence, especially after she proved herself knowledgeable and useful in council matters. Even Vladik Corvinus eventually made peace, though their relationship remained frosty. He'd learned his lesson about underestimating either Keira or Raven. 5 years after she'd fled her wedding, Keira stood in the castle gardens beside Raven, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. She was 28 now, confident and self-assured in ways her younger self could never have imagined. "Any regrets?" Raven asked, slipping his arm around her waist. "Not a single one." She leaned into him, fitting perfectly against his side. "You? Only that I didn't find you sooner." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Though I suppose the timing worked out as it needed to." "I fled my wedding and hid on your jet," Keira mused. "If someone had told me then where I'd end up, I'd have thought they were insane." "The best things in life often start with insane decisions," Raven replied, amusement in his voice. They stood together in comfortable silence, two people who'd found each other across impossible circumstances. Eventually, they'd have to face the reality of Keira's mortality, the fact that she would age while Raven remained unchanging. But that was a bridge to cross later. For now they had this: love, partnership, and a future they were building together one day at a time. "Come on," Keira said, taking his hand. "Maria's making that pasta you pretend not to like, and I'm hungry." "I don't pretend." Raven started to protest, but she laughed and pulled him toward the castle. As they walked through the gardens toward their home, the last light of day fading into twilight, neither looked back. The past was settled, the future uncertain but bright with possibility. And the present was perfect exactly as it was. Years continued to unfold, each bringing new challenges and joys. Keira expanded her role, eventually establishing an organization that helped facilitate peaceful coexistence between humans and vampires. It was delicate work requiring trust building on both sides, but she was uniquely positioned to bridge that gap. Raven supported her endeavors fully, opening doors within vampire society and lending his considerable influence to her cause. Together they became a force for positive change, proving that cooperation between species was possible. On their 10th anniversary, marking a decade since Keira had stumbled onto his jet, Raven took her back to the private airfield where it had all begun. "I remember being terrified that day," Keira said, looking at the jet that was parked there, the same one or perhaps a replacement. "Running away from everything I knew with no plan at all. I remember wondering what the disheveled woman in a wedding dress was doing hiding under my bed," Raven replied with a smile, "and being utterly captivated from the moment I saw you." "Liar, you were annoyed." "I was intrigued," he corrected. "Annoyance came later, when you argued with me about everything." He turned to face her fully, his expression growing serious. "Keira, these 10 years have been the happiest of my very long life. You've given me hope, purpose, love, everything I thought I'd lost forever. You've given me freedom," Keira replied. "The chance to be truly myself, to build a life on my own terms. I was so lost before I met you, Raven. You helped me find myself." He reached into his pocket and produced a small velvet box. Keira's breath caught as he opened it, revealing a ring in antique setting with a deep blue sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. "This belonged to my mother," Raven said quietly. "It's been in the Draconescu family for over 500 years. I know we can't marry in any legal sense that would be recognized by human or vampire law, but I want you to have this as a symbol of my commitment. You are my partner, my love, my choice. For whatever time we're given, I'm yours completely." Tears streamed down Keira's face as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the sapphire catching the light like trapped sky. "I'm yours too," she whispered. "Always." They kissed there on the airfield where their story had begun, surrounded by mountains and sky and the promise of more years together. It wasn't a traditional ending. There was no wedding with guests, no societal approval, no guarantee of forever. But it was theirs, built on love and choice and mutual respect. And really, Keira thought as Raven held her close, that was better than any fairy tale ending she could have imagined. The years ahead would bring their share of difficulties, the inevitable realities of Keira's aging, the ongoing challenges of their unusual relationship, the politics and dangers inherent in the vampire world. But they would face all of it together, two people from different worlds who'd found common ground in love. Sometimes the best love stories don't follow expected paths. Sometimes they begin with desperate flights and chance encounters. Sometimes they require courage to step away from what's expected and embrace what's real. Keira had fled her wedding and hidden on a private jet, unaware that the pilot was the vampire king himself. That single act of desperate rebellion had led her to a life more extraordinary than anything she could have planned. And as she stood in Raven's arms, wearing his mother's ring and surrounded by the mountains that had become home, she knew without doubt that she'd made the right choice. Love wasn't always easy, but it was always, always worth it. And they lived perhaps not happily ever after in the traditional sense, but happily enough, filled with purpose and partnership and deep, abiding love that transcended the boundaries between human and vampire, mortal and immortal, expected and extraordinary. Their story was complete, their threads all woven together into something beautiful and lasting. And in the end, that was everything they needed.